So in this video I'm going to do something similar to what I did the last 2 weeks, and in the last 2 videos I made Pokemon teams for Mario characters, except this time I'm doing the same thing but with characters from the Kirby series. So if you didn't see the other 2 videos, essentially the rules for this are that I'm kind of making it like Pokemon gym leaders, so that each team, every Pokemon on it follows one type. And I also tried to get 6 Pokemon for each team, and what I did is I made it so that each Pokemon relates to the character that they're on the team of. So, what better place to start than with Kirby himself? And for him, I gave him a normal type team where the ace would be Ditto, because Ditto is kind of like Kirby in the fact that it can copy other Pokemon's abilities and become them pretty much, just like how Kirby can swallow enemies and kind of become them and gain their abilities. Then I just added 2 round pink creatures, which are Blissey and Licky Licky, and that is the only reason they're here, because they are round and pink like Kirby. But I also added Wigglytuff, which is also round and pink, but it's more specific here because it evolves from Jigglypuff, which is often compared to Kirby, especially since they're both in Smash together. Then there's Snorlax, which is just there because he's a big, round guy like Kirby, except Kirby isn't big. And I was also kind of thinking of the sleep power-up that Kirby has when I saw Snorlax, so I just added it. And then lastly, Castform, because it can change its type and become different things, and I guess you could say get different powers when it changes with the weather, kind of like how Kirby changes with his copy abilities. Then I did Highness, who is not the main antagonist, but an antagonist in Kirby's Star Allies, and I gave him a Psychic-type team, which would be led by Hatteran, because they're both kind of sinister mage creatures. And then the next 3 things I added to his team are all supposed to represent the 3 mage sisters from Kirby Star Allies, because Highness kind of rules over the 3 of them, and each of the 3 mage sisters has their own element. One is ice, one is lightning, and one is fire. So I just picked a random psychic Pokemon that has a dual type that is those 3 elements. So Mr. Rhyme for ice, which is Francisca, the mage sister. Then Delphox for fire, which is Flamberge. And Alolan Raichu for lightning, which is Zanpartisan. And then also I added Screamtail, because its name is Screamtail, and Highness, his voice in the game, he screams a lot. And lastly, Unknown, just because, Highness gets up to some mysterious business, you could say, so Unknown's name is literally Unknown. I thought it worked. Anyway, next is DaRoach, who is the main antagonist of Kirby Squeak Squad for the DS. I gave him a Dark-type team, which is quite fitting, which would be led by Honchkrow, because they're both bipedal animals that have hats, except Honchkrow's hat is kind of part of its body, but they have that in common. I thought that works out. Then I added 3 things to the team to represent the other 3 Squeaks on DaRoach's team, which are Doc, Spinny, and Storo. To represent Doc, I did Morpeko, since Doc has his little electric UFO thing, and Morpeko's an electric type. Then Alolan Raticate to represent Storo, because they're both big, fat mice. And then Weavile to represent Spinny, because they both have claws that they attack with. Then I also added Thievul and Crocodile, because I don't know if Crocodile's actually based on a thief, but it has Crook in its name, and then Thievul is obviously based on a thief. And that's pretty much what DaRoach is in Squeak Squad, because he steals Kirby's cheesecake. Very interesting lore. Next up is Metaknight, a staple character of the series, who I gave a Steel-type team, mostly just things that are based on swords. So I gave him Aegislash as the ace, because it's literally a sword, and King Gambit, because it's also kind of a sword, and Empoleon, because it's also kind of a sword, I guess more of a trident, but it works. Then Magnezone, which I added to represent the Howlbird, which is Metaknight's ship, or spaceship. Magnezone kind of looks like one, so why not? And then also, I did a little play on words and I added Metagross and Corviknight because Metagross starts with Meta and Corviknight ends with Night, so Meta Knight. Then I did Dedede, who is, if not Meta Knight, then it's Dedede, is easily the most popular enemy from the series. And for him, I also gave him a Steel-type team. He would have Tinkaton as the ace because they both have big hammers. Then Empoleon, because Empoleon is literally a penguin, like Dedede is, except to go further, it has a mask, so it's kind of like masked Dedede, I guess you could say. Then King Gambit, because it has King in its name, so it works out. And then Bastiodon and Fortress are here. I added the both of them because Dedede has a castle, and that's pretty much like a bastion or a fortress, and that's where their names come from, so I added them. And lastly, Togedemaru, which I only added because it was the only steel type I could find that has DE in its name. And Dedede's name is just DE 3 times in a row, so I added that. Then I did Galactonite, which I gave a bug-type team. And bug-type sounds pretty weird, but it actually kind of works out because, first of all, I had to add a Scavalier as the ace, because it is a knight that has spears, just like Galactonite. But I didn't want to do another Steel-type team, so I did Bug, which is Escavalier's other type. But in Kirby Star Allies, Galactonite appears, but then he gets turned into Morphonite from the Butterfly, which is a bug. So because of that, I made it a Bug-type team. I also added Beedrill, because it's also got spears like Galactonite does. And then Kricketune, because it doesn't really have spears, but its arms are kind of spear-like. Then I added Rabsca and Orbeetle because they're both kind of like alien space bugs, and Galactonite is obviously from space. And lastly, Centiskorch, which I added to represent Morphonite. Obviously not a butterfly, but it has that whole fiery aspect to it, like Morphonite does, and it's red like Morphonite. So I added it. Then Wispy Woods, who I gave a grass-type team, obviously, of mostly just Pokemon that are trees, being Trevenant, Exeggutor, Alolan Exeggutor, Torterra, and then I also added a Flapple, because Wispy drops apples on you during the boss fight, and also Ferrothorn, because Wispy drops Gordos on you during the boss fight, which are those spiky ball things, and Ferrothorn kind of looks like that. Then I did Adeline, who is... she's a character in the Crystal Shards, except she's technically also a character in Dreamland 3, but technically that's kind of a different character. It's weird, I kind of consider them the same character, so anyway, I gave her team a normal type team, led by Smeargle, because it's a painter like she is, and also Grafaiai, because it's also a painter like she is, and Grafaiai is pretty much the modern-day version of Smeargle. Then I added Oranguru because it has the fan that it holds, but if you look at it, you could say it kind of looks like a paintbrush. Then I added Farfetch'd, not Galarian, just the normal one, because I guess you could say its leek also looks like a paintbrush. Then I added Ditto, which goes to represent her boss fight in Kirby's Dreamland 3, though I guess you could say that's not actually her. Look it up on the Wikipedia, I don't really get it. Anyway, in that boss fight, she makes paintings, and they turn into living things. So I was just thinking Ditto can turn into things, so why not add it to the team? That relationship is kind of there. And lastly, I did Farigiraf, because it's like a cute giraffe, but then when the mouth closes, it turns into this evil creature, because Adeline, in Crystal Shard, she's a good character, but then she gets possessed and turns evil, and also she's a bad guy in Dreamland 3, if you consider that the same character. I'm not going to keep saying that. Anyway, that's her team. Next up is Marx, who is a pretty popular enemy. I gave him a Psychic-type team, which would be led by Mr. Mime, because they are both creepy jester dudes. Also Mr. Rhyme, because it's pretty much just Mr. Mime. And then Solrock and Lunatone to represent space, because Marx is from space, and you fight him in the Milky Way Wishes minigame mode in Kirby Superstar, and I actually forget, but I'm pretty sure the whole plot of that is that the sun and the moon are fighting, so Solrock and Lunatone are the sun and moon. And then I added Screamtail, which, for the same reason as Highness's team, Marx also has a high-pitched screaming voice, so Screamtail has Scream in its name. I added it. And then for Ridgiraffe, for the same reason as Adeline's team, because at first he looks cute, but then he turns into this creepy thing. So yeah, that is all I've got for Kirby characters. Next week I'm going to do Minecraft characters, and after that I'm kind of out for now with teams for stuff, but I have a different whole type of video I'm going to get into after that. So yeah, for now, if you like this, consider liking and subscribing and all that, and commenting, and also, thanks for watching.